Hello everyone. We are thrilled to be back with the African Wildlife Foundation Thought Leadership Series. This year, we are committed to bring you more insightful people and discussions about conservation and livelihood in Africa. As you might notice, I'm not broadcasting out of Nairobi. I'm just here in Zimbabwe with a back for Victoria Falls, where we are having a workshop for the African executive directors for the National Park Services in Africa, having a discussion on rural protected area and conservation areas in Africa. So today is one of Africa's finest and most vocal female conservationists. This is Professor Patience Gandiwa. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm going to first put aside the questions I plan to ask you, because I just learned that you have a history with African Wildlife Foundation. Can you share that?
Thank you very much. I was 19 when I joined the African Wildlife Foundation Zambezi Heartland team as an intern, cum research assistant, as part of my third academic year placement when I was pursuing Bachelor of Science degree in wildlife and rangeland management with Bindura University of Science Education. That was the beginning of my career pursuing transboundary conservation initiatives. What AWF termed heartlands then, with a team that was led by Jimmy Mandima, and of course with support from my academic supervisors such as Professor John Mpangwa, I realized that this is what we are now calling transfrontier conservation areas. Therefore, to AWF, I believe that the TFCA concept was already a guiding framework for landscape conservation, which is something that I'm doing now. Up to date, this is almost 17 years later. And the mentorship I received then really laid a very good, solid foundation that cultivated and nurtured in me the ecologist that I grew to be, nurtured with a very, very good organizational culture. And the role, seeing my space in the role of science and research in informing what the African Wildlife Foundation does in the various landscapes that they work, it really inspired me. And I felt also very welcome and part of the family, up to date. And I think, well, I never got the chance to work for AWF, but I've always had the chance to work with AWF serving the government of Zimbabwe. And I'm very grateful for that foundation, which was solid, that AWF gave me in the early years of my career. The first research paper that is on my publication profile, over 63 papers that I've published so far. The first paper was with my mentor, who was with AWF, Jimmy Mandima, on wildlife movement corridors in the Zambezi Heartland. And the first map I produced with assistance of David Williams, who is here attending Africa's Protected Area Directors Conference. Yeah. I was so excited to see him here to say, David, do you know I produced my first map with your assistance? And I was so thrilled to see my data from the field on the map and say, wow, these are the wildlife corridors in the Zambezi Heartland. And I look back with a smile when I think about those experiences that I was exposed to, and the mentorship that I still cherish even up to date, which made me who I am today.
No, that's a great story. David Williams is still with us. He's a senior director with heading our GIS and mapping exercise. And your data is very critical to a lot of the work we are doing with African Union. So we thank you very much for those early days. And of course, we are continuing work with you here in Zimbabwe. And let's move to Zimbabwe because that's where you are now and doing a lot of work. Zimbabwe to us is a very, very good example of a government that has invested and successfully worked on conservation programs because the results we see, Zimbabwe has the majority of Africa's elephants. Almost half of the population of Africa's elephants are in this country. And what is it that is working in Zimbabwe? And what is it that other African governments, perhaps, and national park services can learn from your work and what does Zimbabwe National Park Services have managed to do to hold such a large herd? And I've just learned this morning that poaching has declined here. Whether it's rhinos, whether it's elephants and other species. So what's working here in Zimbabwe?
Thank you very much. In Zimbabwe, we believe in conservation of our wildlife for ourselves. Before we consider wildlife as a commodity to be enjoyed by tourists that travel from afar. So wildlife conservation, we feel it's a culture. Before we consider any other objectives, how is it a culture? You know, I think every Zimbabwean has a totem somehow. If someone doesn't have, we give totems. So a totem is an animal that is associated with a family or clan, and this has always been part of the conservation ethos that are entrenched deeply in our cultural history. And so we would want to see wildlife and habitat in perpetuity for the sake of our culture and our history and the way we appreciate wildlife. So that's important because the objective why we do conservation or why we conserve wildlife is very important because we believe conservation should make sense to the people that are living closest to such wildlife. We also believe in sustainable use, which means also that we do not want to see ourselves as a people being disentangled from our natural environment because we depend so much on it as a way of life, but also underlying the word sustainability underneath, because we know that 70% of our population in Zimbabwe, they are living on the countryside, and the other remainder, of course, is in the urban and peri-urban areas. So it's very important to know that the people of Zimbabwe that are living with the majority of these magnificent species, including rhinos and wildlife, they need to also benefit from wildlife, which means that we put some economic, apart from the social value, we also put the economic value to make sure that wildlife conservation as a competitive land use delivers on the goods and services and benefits to the people of Zimbabwe. And this is why the Communal Areas Management Program for Indigenous Resources, the Campfire Program, it really stood the test of time. Of course, it, like any program, is not perfect, but it has really inculcated that sense of economic benefits and wildlife being a competitive land use option among other options that the rural communities can explore, including agriculture, mining, etc. Therefore, I think in a way that has made Zimbabwe succeed. Why? About out of almost 90, maybe to 100,000 elephants that we have in the country, of course, 90% is inside the protected areas, but it's not locked inside the protected areas. Our protected area systems are open systems that we allow wildlife to go inside and outside the protected area so that the communities also can benefit from wildlife-based land uses. So this means that we have also somehow, without designating additional land as protected areas, but we have expanded the wildlife and the wildlife habitat beyond the protected area network. So pursuing that wildlife conservation agenda, which the organization that I work for, the Parks and Wildlife Management Authority, has mandated for conservation of wildlife, both inside and outside the protected area. So that model of having unfenced, largely unfenced park ecosystems, and also pursuing the community-based conservation, and also transboundary conservation area initiative, which we are pursuing 6 of those initiatives, has really provided more space for wildlife to roam free and wild, and has provided more opportunities to grow the population and also for communities to benefit. So I think the habitat that we have managed to secure beyond the gazetted protected area network is really one of the keys that has enabled us to be able to house such a huge biomass of live elephants in our country, among other thriving populations. For example, cheetah. The majority of our cheetah population, actually, Kaddu, it's outside the protected area. That's where the habitat is. So we have seen that communities our stewards, they are our stakeholders, not just beneficiaries. That are actively participating in the conservation matrix of Zimbabwe. And I think that has made Zimbabwe one of the world leaders in sustainable conservation and sustainable underlined.
No, I like the underlining of sustainability, and you touched on the values of conservation, which are cultural, social, and economic. And I know that we've worked with your government in the first Biodiversity Economic report that has outlined the value of biodiversity in Zimbabwe's economic development. Why do you think that has been important to Zimbabwe, and what can that do to strengthen the park service in this country?
Thank you very much. And sometimes there's a beauty of being the first. I was talking about the Campfire program, which is one of the oldest and maybe one of the first community-based or successful community-based conservation models on our continent. But also being one of the first countries in our region to have this biodiversity economy study report and strategy that we launched, it is really set the framework that we can grow the cake. What do I mean? With assistance of our partners, of course, thanks to AWF and other international development partners that gave a hand in terms of the resources for us to be able to do that, because it costs to even come up with such a strategy in the way that we developed it, in a largely consultative manner and a largely inclusive approach. We managed to take stock of the status of our biodiversity, because what is unknown, you can manage, can even plan for it. So it gave that overview and status analysis of where we are in terms of our biodiversity assets, our biological assets as a country, both flora and fauna. And then we go into the issues that are covered in the report, which are the key pillars that are really anchoring this report, providing the foundation for natural capital accounting, looking at wildlife statistics, looking at the status of our fisheries resources, looking at the opportunities with regards to bioprospecting, and so on. So these key elements have really provided clarity also to our diverse stakeholders and also the local communities in terms of Zimbabwe's natural capital asset endowment that we have, so that we can also unlock investment opportunities that partners can come, whether it's domestic or international partners, with clarity of purpose and clarity in terms of what is it that we intend to achieve as a country and what deliverables are there for us to follow through. That is what this biodiversity economy strategy has already put on the table. And when cards have been laid on the table in the face of the crisis that we are seeing and some of the undesirable trends that we see in Africa or in the world in terms of species decline and also the threat of climate change, we are seeing an increased value and appreciation even to ordinary Zimbabwean in terms of what we have, because now we can mirror it with what is happening elsewhere. Before we lose it, at least we can save it for the present and future generations.
No, that's great. Now, I want to switch gears away from Zimbabwe because my interaction with you the last 5-6 years has not been so much in Zimbabwe, has been at this global stage, starting in Rwanda, where we had our first Grow Africa Conservation Protected Area and Conservation Summit to discuss why conservation and protected areas are important to Africa. One of the recommendations from that conference was sustainable financing. And I know that you have been one of the champions on the continent that took on that recommendation and have been involved in discussing and shaping what that should look like, what vehicles needs to be done. Why do you think this is critical, if at all, for managing protected areas in Africa and securing their role in Africa's development? What is it? What's driving? Where are the gaps? What does that Africa needs to do? And where are we so far since Kigali?
Thank you. I feel nostalgic about Kigali. It was really the inaugural Pan-African Protected Area Congress, the first of its kind in Africa, and thanks to the African Wildlife Foundation and also the IUCN for making it possible. And sometimes they say it seems impossible until it's done. So getting back to your question, Kaddu, we know that the global community is facing a financing gap for biodiversity conservation. It's not a secret. Maybe we only have close to 200 billion out of maybe 700 billion that we might need. Not that it's a lot of money when we look in global sense, but it's quite a substantial. When I look at Africa as the leading continent in terms of the biodiversity that we have, when we compare to all other regions, Africa comes first in terms of what we have here in terms of biodiversity. But the inverse is true when we look at the investments in terms of the finances that are available for conservation in Africa. So it's a paradox that maybe those that have got fewer biodiversity assets have got more financial resources, and Africa, which has got more biodiversity assets, has got fewer financial resources that's available. So when COVID hit us in 2020, as Africa's protected area directors, we really saw the shock because we are on the ground and we see the needs, the daily needs, the gaps, and it really made a situation which was already precarious more vulnerable. We went from bad to worse, but we didn't just sit and watch, because we cannot afford to lose this heritage, because wildlife and the habitat is our heritage. We put our heads together, and thanks to AWF for the facilitation and being a catalyst to help us, envision the future, see beyond the COVID era, seeing beyond even our own generation. And that was when this idea of perhaps a Pan-African Conservation Trust was born. It was born out of a vision that perhaps for us, if we look at the entire spectrum of protected and conserved areas in Africa, 8,600 of them, and we can
be able to identify the gaps and the priorities. And we know, because we budget for these areas every year, we know what we need. And we know that even the existing financing mechanisms that are there and the conservation financing models, which were mainly based on tourism, are inadequate. There are still gaps. So that gap became an opportunity, which we think it's a space to innovate and collaborate and partner with those that really care and want to see the protection of Africa's wildlife into the future. And we believe that the creation of a Pan-African Conservation Trust, which will complement existing conservation trust funds and also other financing mechanisms. And we want to grow out of a donor dependency syndrome kind of idea. We want to seize the opportunity for the world to see Africa's natural capital assets as opportunities for investment. It's not like we are putting nothing on the table, because it's not by accident that we have got this biodiversity and these protected areas. And we believe that we need to value them, and we need to package them in such a way that we can attract more private financing and we can attract more to bridge that gap so that we do not lose them. So when I read the Kigali call to action and what our leadership committed at that Pan-African inaugural Congress, I think it gave me a hope for a future of Africa's protected and conserved areas that are secure, that are well-financed, not with 3-year funding or 5-year funding. We need long-term financing because the ecosystems and the habitats that we are looking at have evolved over millions of years. These are not short-term commitments. We need more long-term commitment. And our dream is to have an endowment made of at least maybe 200 million or even more, even billions. But we know that there's a reality out there, and we cannot maybe hope to immediately have that kind of endowment in the short term. Yet we've got daily needs that we need to. So we believe that having this hybrid financing mechanism that will bridge the gap in the short, medium, and long term, we will really be able to sustain Africa's wildlife heritage. And we will always look back at the Kigali call to action with pride.
Yeah. No, Kigali was very important for us as Africans. I mean, how could we have waited for years and to be able to sit down for the first time to look at our assets and our heritage and how we can manage it? Now, you are a scientist. I'm not. I'm not a biologist as you. And our listeners, how can you help me, unpack the climate change? What climate change impact on and threats on biodiversity on the continent and the entire life ecosystem. What do you think that we should be aware of in terms of climate change, and what should we do as Africans?
Thank you for that person, Kaddu. I think first things first, it's important that we understand what climate change is, and is it real or is some scientists' wildest theory. I think looking at what the climate-related extreme events that our continent and even the rest of the world has witnessed so far and more frequently in the recent past, it's not an assumption that climate change is real and climate change is affecting us, and climate change is increasing our vulnerability and the vulnerability of the ecosystems that we are not just the ecosystem, but the socio-ecological systems that we are conserving. How? When we have more increase in frequency of droughts and floods and fires, it erodes primary production that is sustaining and anchoring the whole food web in the protected or also in the conserved areas where we've got integrated land uses, including livestock. And when there's no forage, and when there's shortage of water, and when we increasingly pump water from the underground aquifers without being mindful of the safe yield, what will it take us until when? What can we do with the tipping points that we are seeing? At what stage are we going to make certain provisions or intervention? What strategies should we be putting in place with the increasing number of invasive alien species that are threatening our marine, our freshwater, and our terrestrial ecosystems? So climate change has really just amplified the challenges that we were already having, which means that there's actually an increased need to invest more to protect natural and indigenous species. If we have to clear, for example, it's Lantana Camara, or it's maybe we need to take note of the red claw crayfish in the lake freshwater ecosystems. It costs money. When the problem was small, we were already having some shortages. Now that problem has been multiplied several times with climate change. The local communities that are neighboring or living with wildlife, their livelihoods are becoming more and more vulnerable. What alternatives and innovations should we be thinking about? Should we be investing in those communities? What energy in terms of sustainable energy so that we can do the transition sustainably with these communities? We cannot stop them from cutting down trees if there's no alternative to fuel. What is it? So I'm seeing that climate change has really made our challenges bigger, but there are also opportunities to innovate in that space so that we are able to cope with the demographics. Like in the case of Zimbabwe, wildlife populations, most of our large animals are increasing, but also the human population is not getting smaller. The livestock populations are not getting smaller. In light of the realities of those demographic factors, we need innovation in the way we plan our lands, in the way we consume, in the way we are fueling, etc. So I think there is a need for us to mainstream biodiversity conservation and climate change adaptation and resilience building in all the protected area planning and integrated land use planning that we are doing. And it's great that institutions like AWF, where they are working, you are developing this integrated land use planning to guide your priority intervention areas so that we can see the interventions, because you can solve all the problems in the matrix of all the other issues, because everything affects all other things. So unguided and unplanned interventions, sometimes it can make the problem that worse. So this is actually the message to say climate change, adaptation and understanding, or even planning would really need us to have a reflection of these issues, even as we plan, even for species management, like the National Elephant Management Plan or Regional Elephant Management Plan. In the context of Zimbabwe, we have got regional elephant management plans involving our neighboring countries. So I think that is the way to go, but it's really a challenge that no one institution or no one country can address on its own. This calls for SDG number 17, partnerships.
No, thank you very much. Now, we are here at the on the sidelines of Africa's executive directors of national parks. We have majority of them here, This is, I think, your second meeting. Can you share your experience? Why is this important, and what have you learned, and why Zimbabwe has hosted us here? So you are the host. So talk about this conference and what the how it's supporting the Zim parks, and what are you learning from it, and what's the future?
Thank you, Kaddu. I think it's an honor for us as Zimbabwe to be hosting the second Africa's Protected Area Directors Conference. We were hosted really well with Kenya when we had the first Protected Area Directors Conference in Nairobi, and we enjoyed visiting Nairobi National Park. It was beautiful. Out here in Victoria Falls, in Zimbabwe, we feel that perhaps it's the first time, well, at least in my career history with Zimpact, that I've seen so many protected area directors spanning across different sub-regions of Africa gathered under one roof to discuss protected areas in Africa. I think one of the gaps that, or one of the challenges that we have observed from our previous interactions is, this lack of understanding each other. So just the opportunity for us to meet here and talk about the situation of our protected areas in the different countries from West Africa, East Africa, Central, Southern Africa. I think it makes us realize that what is actually binding us or bringing us together is much more stronger and important than the few things that divide us. I have seen a divided Africa over the years at various fora. And I think part of the division is being emanating from the fact that we didn't have enough time for ourselves to interact and reflect on the challenges that we are facing and to understand each other's situation. So just having people here and the field visits that we organized for our guests here in Zimbabwe, for seeing our colleagues even from West Africa, visiting our community here in Victoria Falls, and talking to the communities, hearing issues from the communities themselves. We felt that somehow it has closed and plugged some information gap and lack of appreciation about the situation in Zimbabwe with regards to human-wildlife conflict, with regards to the challenges that the people living with wildlife here are facing, and just bringing closer home also the concept of trans-frontier conservation areas. The fact that the protected area directors are here in Kalvango, Zambezi, trans-frontier conservation areas. Well, back in my days with AWF, it used to be called Four Corners.
Yes.
Yes, so this is CASA TFCA, and we are at the heart of CASA TFCA in an area with multiple international designations. Just the feel and the appreciation of the environment and what we can achieve when partners or countries come together to work across different land areas. And this is also the area where we piloted the Kavango Zambezi Univisa program with Zambia. So talking about the issues whilst we are here where people can actually see it, I think it closes a gap where people have to imagine or some conceptualized idea of how things are, and also having our colleagues ask us questions and, us also learning from them. It has been, I think it's not yet over. The conference is still going on. I feel like it's already a success. And it has been made possible by the partners that believe in the vision that we hold as protected area directors. Because What is also unique about this conference is that this is not a conference for politicians. We are protected area directors, and wildlife and habitat. Wildlife is apolitical. They don't vote. So we are discussing technical issues so that we all have an understanding and appreciation of each other's situation, and also sharing, best practices in terms of how we can learn from each other without dreaming about solutions from elsewhere or other continents. So we feel very honored that we have been able to host this conference.
No, absolutely. And there's nothing that has captured my attention in terms of cross-border collaboration than the Victoria Falls that span the two countries and shared resources that remind us that actually the borders are just too artificial, and as they should be to many of us and in our work. Now we are coming to the end of our conversation, but I want you, to really help me and help some of my viewers, especially young girls listening to you now. You are the director and technical advisor, International Conservation Affairs, Zimbabwe National Park and Wildlife Authority. What would you tell a young girl listening to you? First, break down what that means. Technical advisor, International Conservation Affairs, Zimbabwe Park. What should that mean to a young girl listening to you now? And what's the message you give her? She wants to get into conservation. She's looking at you and said, I want to be like her. What's your message?
Thank you very much. I would say, well, it's important that I unpack my portfolio just in brief. So my portfolio includes management of transfrontier conservation areas. It includes following through the commitments that we have under joint commissions. It involves implementation of multilateral environmental agreements, of which there are about 7 or 8, where wildlife conservation is a prominent matter that we follow through as a state agency. And it also, my portfolio involves monitoring and evaluation of projects and partnerships, and also, of course, corporate compliance and being a technical voice on things that I'm technically competent on in the DG's office. So that's the technical advisory role is more of a technical executive service or assistance to the Director General. It's a space, myself or as a trained as an ecologist, it's a space that still has pure women. And I think when there are young girls or young women in science out there, there are opportunities in the field of wildlife conservation that is still badly dominated. And I think it's a decision that is not about a career. It's more of a call to stewardship. It's more of a passion driven. It's not about money, fame, and impact, but I think it's having a sense of purpose that this is worth the time and effort. So I know it's not easy, a decision to make, especially for a woman, because I'm also a mother. I'm a mother of 2. I have 2 boys. One is 9, the other is 6. To balance all those things as a woman and as a mother, but it is possible. Here I am, and I am enjoying, and I feel I don't imagine myself having pursued other careers, because it's so fulfilling, and the nature triple crisis that we are facing requires women to be part of the center of the solution, because I think men have done a lot over the years, and we need more and more young women to also get into the conservation space and save generations to come.
No, thank you very much. And I think they are listening to you. Viewers, I think we are coming to the end of our series today. Thank you very much, Professor, for your time and for joining us today. And we'll meet again next time. So stay tuned. Thank you.